And thank you for joining us for today's pre-SAB meeting. Also, thank you those who are tuning in via the webcast. Slight announcement, there has been a room change. Today's board will be at the State Capitol in room 444 at 4 o'clock. We also have a little change up today. DSA will be presenting first, Division of State Architect, and Ms. Masha Lutzek.
All right, good morning. My name is Masha Lutzek, and I'm with the Codes and Standards Unit at the Division of State Architect, and our unit is responsible for the majority of policy development for structural safety, fire life safety, for school construction projects. So, as always, I'll provide some updates. We have an important update from our policy development, which is a document that we refer to as IR, Interpretation of Regulations, and it has a number A88. A stands for administrative. We recently released it. We sent an announcement to the subscription email list that we have on file, and a lot of architects and school districts are part of that list. And so we made an announcement as well to our project inspectors, all the project inspectors that are currently certified. This is an important update, and so I'm using the opportunity of this meeting to also provide information on it. The document is titled Project Inspector and Assistant Inspector Duties and Performance. Although this may seem as only project inspectors should really pay attention, in fact, we are trying to draw everybody's attention to it because project inspectors are an important part, one of the most important parts of a successful construction project and project certification. They're hired by the school districts, so it's important for the school districts to know what their responsibilities are, and they're approved for, they have to work under the supervision of and general direction of the project architect. So again, it's very important for the design professional to be aware of all the duties and responsibilities and how they impact the project. So the current revision that we've made, it does primarily three things. We clarified what's expected of the project inspector's job file, which is a compilation of all project-related documents. We've provided information on what our oversight role is in regards to project inspectors, and we've included a new form which is called Job File Review Checklist. So before I get into too much detail on this, I wanted to provide some background information. This is just some key facts that folks that may be new to the program are not familiar with. The Field Act, which sets the practices for school construction, requires continuous inspection for each school construction project. And to accommodate that, DSA certifies project inspectors in 4 different classifications, and then each project inspector additionally is approved for each project that he or she wants to work on, as hired by the school district and approved by the architect. And the school district must hire a project inspector prior to the start of construction. Construction cannot proceed without a project inspector on site. And just for information, the number of certified project inspectors varies. From year to year. Their certification is good for 4 years. I think right now, a rough number that I would give you is we have about 1,300 certified project inspectors. And during, busy times, of course, that number increases as more people become certified. So the role of the project inspector is that he or she observes and documents construction activities. So the project inspector does not have a role of directing construction, of telling the contractor what to do, or telling the architect what to do. But the project inspector observes and documents activities. And a lot of the documents that are generated by a project inspector may trigger the contractor or architect to make changes. The DSA regulations require a project inspector to maintain a job file with all the documents. So that includes everything from plans and specifications to meeting minutes from construction meetings that the inspector will attend along with the contractor and the architect. And at the conclusion of the project, the job file shall be transferred to the school district to be made part of permanent school records. Everything in that job file that basically traces the construction of the project from beginning to end has to be made property of the school district, with the exception of those things that belong personally to the inspector, like code books. But everything else must be transferred to the school district. It becomes part of the record. It makes it much more conducive for the school district to conduct future projects because they will have paperwork on previous construction on the same buildings. And what we did in this current revision of the IR, we've clarified that. So the IR takes the requirements of our regulations and puts them into a document that is, we hope, well organized and easy to understand and can be used as a guidebook. Okay, so what we discovered and what as a result of the audit that DSA had is that a big issue for us that prevents projects from being certified at the end of construction is poor documentation. And in analyzing our processes, we determined that the job file that the project inspector maintains at the job site is one of the key areas of where documentation should be strengthened. So the purpose of this job file review process that we're launching is to review how the project inspector is doing his or her record keeping. Sorry for the acronyms here. Our field engineers that go out to the site that will conduct the job file review will use a simple checklist to document how procedures are being followed, how things are being maintained in the job file. And this short checklist will be used to communicate our findings to the project inspector and to the architect consistently statewide. So all project inspectors and all architects will receive the same type of communication from DSA, which we hope will facilitate better project compliance. And we're hoping that reviewing the contents of the job file during construction will address issues during construction rather than at the end when work may be covered up, documents are long gone, things are much more difficult to find, and that's one of the primary reasons why projects go uncertified. So this is what the checklist looks like. It's been made simple on purpose. It is shown here for folks just to get a glimpse of what it looks like. The printable copies on our website. This is the document that will be completed by the field engineer at the job site, reviewing project inspector or record keeping, but we are providing it for everyone's benefit so everyone knows what the requirements are. And so the back of that form has the requirements spelled out so that the person doesn't have to dig up a copy of our regulations of our IR. Those requirements are right there. So we explain what each of the 13 items must include. So that's the job file. And again, here is a summary. The job file review is going to be conducted by DSA field staff. This is effective as of August 15th, so school districts may see this already in the field. The project inspector is expected to demonstrate the file keeping to DSA field staff. Staff member from DSA will complete the checklist and transmit it to the inspector and architect by email. This is the best technology we have right now. And there's also this document that DSA has long been using, which is called a field trip note. And that's the document that basically summarizes the site visit, including construction observation, and tells the architect project inspector if there are any things that need to be corrected, documented, whatnot. Those things are documented in the field trip notes. So we're keeping that document intact. We're not changing it. If, for example, the job file review shows that the inspector doesn't have a DSA approved copy of the plans and specifications, that's a major problem because the inspector can't inspect to documents that are not approved by DSA. So the field trip note would indicate that the architect is being directed by DSA to provide a DSA approved copy of plans and specifications to the inspector to use in inspection. And so that would be the direction that would be provided in the field trip note. So the field trip note concept isn't changing. We're keeping it the same, but we are using the job file review to document how records are being kept, and it could work both ways. It documents good record keeping and non-complete record keeping, and so that that it's not used as a penalty against the inspector. So, in summary, we hope that this process will, first of all, clarify what is required to be kept in the job file. That's why we've updated our IR, put a second page to the checklist that spells out what the requirements are. We hope that it will facilitate resolution of issues during construction and contribute to timely project certification. So this process has been launched. It's going to occur at the site visits that our field engineers conduct, and we think that at first it'll probably, as a new concept, will require probably some time, additional time for our site visits, but as time goes on, things will become more familiar and easier. This job file review will be completed at every site visit. So on a long project that takes 6 months and there are several site visits from DSA, a job file review will be conducted at each one of those. And again, if you want to see the checklist, it is attached to our IR A8, and I encourage you to print the newest copy. We were hoping that we've clarified several things that would make the requirements more clear for folks that are constructing projects. And if there are no questions on that item, my second update today is on the status of our regulation proposals. This is the regulation writing season for us and other agencies that are producing building codes proposals and submitting them to the Building Standards Commission. So we've submitted the following to Building Standards Commission. My unit is responsible for parts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just to remind everyone, in our part 1, which is our administrative code, which is our administrative regulations that regulate project submittal and approval, we have some important changes that we are proposing. One is consolidation of testing special inspection reporting under a lab versus multiple special inspectors. We hope to, we have a big section that proposes eligibility requirements for project inspector certification. So this would be new requirements for folks to meet to enter the project inspector program to become certified to then be approved for school construction projects. And then we're also implementing a process, filling a void in our current process, which addresses the fact that a project inspector may be replaced in the middle of a project for various reasons. Perhaps the school district needs that project inspector's expertise on another project, or the project inspector is moving out of state, whatnot. There could be numerous reasons. Projects take a long time to complete, and there's currently no process for DSA to facilitate a replacement, transition of documents, transition of inspection duties. So we need regulations to be able to implement that. So those are the important highlights. And the reason that I am presenting those today is because there is there's some code activities that are going on. So one thing that already happened was the BSC Building Standards Commission has code advisory committees that meet on each part of the code separately. So, for example, our administrative regulations were heard by a committee on July 17th. And our other parts 2, 3, 4, 5 were also heard. And the committee's recommended approval as submitted. And that recommendation, along with our proposals, then goes to the Building Standards Commission after the public comment periods are completed. So there is an upcoming 45-day public comment period, and for our parts 1 and 2, which I believe are most important to the school district and design professionals, parts 1 being our administrative regulations and part 2 being our structural safety for schools, that public comment period is going to be from August 31st to October 15th. So what the Building Standards Commission will do is they will post our documents on their website close to the August 31st date, and they will spell out a process. They'll have a form available for folks to fill out to provide comments. And the comments could be supportive, they could be not supportive, they could be comments that are asking for clarification. Then DSA is required to respond to all those comments and, if needed, modify our proposals, and if needed, there will be another public comment period for 15 days after that. So that's the schedule, and because DSA works with the Building Standards Commission to do the rulemaking, sometimes you have to toggle between both of our websites to find the documents, but I'm hoping that once they post these documents, they'll be fairly easy to find, usually not too far from their homepage when you log on. So here's the Building Standards Commission website. Once they post the documents, we will also link them from our webpage, probably somewhere on the What's New section. So that's the update on our regulations. And the rest of my presentation is our regular bin time update. Our bin times are going down. They're, again, vary across the state as usual, depending on staffing and project submittal. So we're presenting those also here and on our website so that folks have an idea of what to expect as far as bin time. The projects waiting for DSA to be picked up for review. So these bin times are in weeks, and they're separated by structural, fire life safety, and access, as the disciplines have separate teams that review the submittals. So that's the gist of my presentation. And if no one has any questions, I'm passing it to OPSC. Thank you.
Thank you, Masha. With the various bond sales, as of the end of June, we had about $708.6 million available in funds. By the end of July, we had released over $213 million. So as of the end of July, we have $494.8 available. We have been processing lots of fund releases, so expect that number to be a lot less next month. And this is our famous pie chart. It represents the new construction bonding authority for propositions 1D, 55, and 47. That represented over $15 billion in funds available. To date, we have apportioned over $14 million in funds. We have a current unfunded list of $234 million, and we have about $341.8 remaining authority to be apportioned. With that, I'd like to turn it over to the application review team to give a presentation. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Is it Michael? I'm sorry. Highlights for today's State Allocation Board from Michael Watanabe.
Good morning. I'm going to highlight 3 items for today's board. These 3 are all carryovers from prior months' boards. The first one we're talking about is methods for accepting applications once bond authority has been exhausted. If you've been following the board meeting discussions over the last 3/4 of a year or so, last fall we had a new construction subcommittee talk about the remaining bond authority in new construction, and it's rapidly depleting. The general consensus of that committee was that they believed that staff and the board should continue accepting and processing applications to continue to show a need for the program going forward and until we have a future bond measure. We took those recommendations to the State Allocation Board, and in February they recommended us go to the Implementation Committee to discuss methods for tracking applications. There were concerns by some members that to continue to process applications without a future bond program in place and what that program may look like, that we essentially create a liability on the part of the state to fund these projects in the future. Took those discussions to the Implementation Committee and laid out a variety of options, which I'll go over to discuss their concerns. The general consensus from Implementation Committee was that the reason why we need to continue processing the applications is, 1, to show a need for the state to continue to do bonds for school construction projects. There's also a desire by school districts to have some certainty in their project that, yes, under current criteria, that their project would meet the school facility program criteria. They would like us to do a full processing of the application so they knew what dollar amount they could potentially qualify in the future. So we laid out 4 options for the board for tonight for discussion. and they all kind of address those kind of different concerns. Now, absent a positive vote by the board to change what's in regulation already, staff would continue to process applications to an unfunded list for lack of bond authority. We laid out 4 options before the board. The first one is what we do in the back of our book now, and that's publish just our workload list. And that option 1 is reflects in date order received request by school districts for project funding at the amount they requested. It doesn't undergo any review by OPSC's part, and it's not accepted by the board as a viable app at that point. The second option would be for the board to actually take action on that workload list and to acknowledge it. The third option that we've laid out for the board is for OPSC to fully process the application, determine the amounts they could be eligible for under the current program, and then stop short of that by providing that list to the board in the report section. But the board would stop short of taking a formal action on that project to acknowledge it. The fourth option most closely mirrors the current process, where OPSC would do a full review of the project. We present the list to the board, or the project to the board for approval. And in that case, though, what we do is we rename the list. There are some concerns by board members that, as the regulations are laid out right now, that we call this project, put this project on an unfunded list, and what that term really means. So what we propose in option 4 is maybe the board renames the list to a project list or some other term. To address board's concerns about potential liability, option 4, the board could decide to add on additional levels of certifications on the part of the district. Right now, the applications are largely submitted by a district representative. Perhaps the board wants to entertain the option, maybe they get a certification from the full school board to acknowledge that they are submitting an application but have no future guarantee of bond authority or cash in the future. So that's that item. That'll be the first one discussed tonight. Any questions on that one before I move on? Say. The second item for the board's consideration, as part of the discussion on continuing to process the applications, we also brought up the implementation committee the need to carve out bond authority for OPSC, the State Controller's Office, California School Finance Authority, and California Department of Education to have administration costs to continue administrating the program going forward. There wasn't a lot of discussion at IMP over that. The consensus basically was that, yeah, out of current bond authority, before we use it up for unfunded approvals for new projects, that we should go ahead and try to carve something out going forward. So what this item is lays out various options for the board in terms of carving out authority, and we're going to lay out 4 options for the board for consideration, although they could obviously amend that. All 3 options are proposing out carving authority for 3 years, or 3 fiscal years, and what that would do is take authority right off the top of what's left right now before we give it out to new projects. The first option for the board, given where we are with bond authority and the fact that we received applications beyond what we have remaining authority in new construction and modernization, what option 1 proposes is prorating authority across the programs in 1D that actually have authority remaining. And that would be the seismic repair program, career technical education, high performance schools, and the overcrowded relief grant program. And it will propose taking out 3 years, which comes out to about $17.9 million a year for the 4 departments to continue processing those apps for those out of those programs. Option 2 prorates the administration costs across new construction and modernization as well. What that does is lower how much is taken out of the other programs, but it'll also take authority out of new construction and modernization programs. Knowing that we have workload in-house that is beyond authority, by taking this option, you could potentially move projects off the workload list and onto the beyond authority list. So there is that involved. Option 3 proposes taking all the authority out of the overcrowded relief grant program authority. Currently, that's the one with the highest balance of authority remaining, and we also know that we do not have applications that can use all that up at this point in time. That's the third option, and all $53 million for 3 fiscal years would come out of that program. Option 4, again, currently the 2012-2013 Budget Act requires administration costs for the 4 departments come out of Proposition 1D. So what option 4 does is recommends the prorate of the administration costs across all programs in Proposition 1D for the first fiscal year, And for the 2 fiscal years after that, it prorates across Prop 47 and 55. That option would be contingent upon the Budget Act approving it out of that proposition. For all 4 options, if the Budget Act approves a lower amount for the administration costs for any of the departments, the authority would be returned back to these respective programs. And then option 5 for the board is for the board to take it out however they'd like for those programs. So that's the admin item. Any questions on that one? Third item for discussion is a report back to the board from the State Allocation Board Subcommittee on Department of Defense projects. If you've been following the board, the Department of Defense in 2010 created a needs assessment list for all schools on military bases nationwide. And they had $500 million to allocate for those projects. And of that $500 million, California has 7 projects in the top within that $500 million cap. In order to qualify for this funding, the school districts must provide 20% of the project costs. What the subcommittee sought to do is find a way for the state to provide that 20% match for the district. And after reviewing various options and the need for these school districts, they came up with 2 recommendations. The first recommendation was that we create some kind of preliminary apportionment option for these projects. Currently, the new construction and modernization projects do not have the ability to provide preliminary apportionments, only full funding applications. So what this option would propose is maybe the board could do a regulation change to leverage existing authority on existing eligibility for these school districts to save out authority now, even though they don't intend to convert to full projects for a couple years down the line. The second recommendation from the board is for this full State Allocation Board to recommend to the legislator that these kind of projects are taken into account in a full future bond measure. And how that kind of recommendation would be structured would be determined in the future. The only update we have since last month, this item was held over, was that we have heard since then that these school districts that have the need have submitted waivers on the 20% to the Department of Defense. Department of Defense will be at the meeting to speak to those projects, but there could be changes presented by the chair of that subcommittee at this board meeting. Any other questions on that? Okay, now we'll have the application review team.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Tasha Brennan. I'm with the application review team, and we are going to go over the elements of a complete application. Actually, Charles Price, one of my art staff person, will be doing that. And I'd also like to take this moment to introduce the rest of my staff with the application review team that you deal with every day. First of all, I'd like to introduce Adrian Filsigi. This is Adrian. And then Liz Cheney. She's always so happy to do that. Anyways, we're excited to go over this process with you, and if you have any questions at the end of our presentation, please ask us. Thank you.
Good morning. As Tasha mentioned, my name is Charles Price, and I'm going to be going over the elements of a complete application. As all the school districts are aware, the application process involves many elements. I do want to go over or reiterate what Michael mentioned earlier. ART has a process for dealing with applications that are coming in that have exceeded their exceeded the authority. And so currently, when they're received, we accept them and place them in order according to the date stamp. And they're also stored with all their submitted documents and plans. So they're neatly ordered by me personally. I sit in there and I order them neatly by their date stamp as they come in and make sure all the elements are there so that when the time comes to review these applications, ART will do it in an expeditious manner. Once the board has approved of the applications and they go through the board, then ART will run them through their standard review, which means that, as Michael mentioned, we're not reviewing them, so they haven't had a thorough look through by ART, But once they are approved at the board, then we will go through them, look for the elements that complete the application, which I am going to go through right now. So, first thing we do is obviously we get the application in, and Art will take it in and we prepare a complete application package. What does that mean? It means we look at the application, we verify that all the necessary documents that form a complete application are there, although not necessarily looking through the 5004 for any issues that might be related to that. We just look for various documents that are there that support the 5004. Once the application has been deemed complete, then the application is sent to the various areas of OPSC that look it over. For example, project management gets theirs, PVT does the site development, then we have real estate and maybe some dwelling units as well. So it'll be parted out to the various groups that take care of that. Once that's complete, it's sent to the board. So what does Art do? We're looking over your we are kind of taking your project in, making sure everything's there. It takes 3 to 5 business days to do it, and if we do come across anything that is missing, then we provide you a 24-hour courtesy written request, which usually comes in the form of a fax, to request those missing elements. If we do have an incomplete application, then we're going to notify you within 1 to 2 business days. You have 24 hours that we request give you a 24-hour request for those documents. The application is held until the documents are received. If we don't receive the documents in the allotted amount of time, then the application is deemed incomplete, and we package it up and send it back to the district. For complete application packages, what makes it complete? Well, first, you get the OPSC receive date. That's based on the stamp date. Whatever we stamp on it when it comes into the mailroom, that's your receive date. You'll get an initial acceptance letter from us indicating that we've accepted your application, that it meets all the requirements to be a complete application. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it's forwarded to the various analysts, program, site development, real estate, dwelling units. For your district representative update, that's done on the 5003. You only need to fill out Part 1 only. I mean, there's no eligibility that's being submitted, although you can submit your district representative update in conjunction with an eligibility update. What we need is your the governing board's resolution date in the bottom of the document, or just a copy of the board meetings and minutes for the resolution, and then, of course, a signature at the bottom. Don't forget the signature. The 5003 is not needed for changing of the superintendent. You can give us a call for that. So now we'll move on to the 5004. The next few slides are going to be dealing with new construction and modernization together. So what I'm going to be talking about applies to both those types of applications. So you have to use the most current version available on all forms, and they are available on the OPSC website. All signatures must be original wet signatures. If at all possible, because it really does help the analysts to verify these forms, blue ink is helpful. It's not absolutely required, but it is helpful. The certifications on page 8 and 9 must be filled out, and the appropriate approval and governing body resolutions dates filled out. Also, 1 CD approved school site per application. Complete and legible specifications with signed DSA approved stamps. The stamp can be found anywhere on the specifications, front page, back page. I've found it in the middle of the book. Just make sure it's stamped. Complete and legible DSA approved plans. We need full-size copy of those plans. Not half, not quarter. We need full-size copy of those plans. Or if you decide to send it as in an electronic format, we prefer it in the AutoCAD format as a DWG file. It helps out our PVT team. Oh, let me go back to the AutoCAD. If you do send the AutoCAD or the electronic format, don't forget to send a copy of the DSA signed stamp for the approved plan. So you can just send a copy of whatever you have. Just make sure that it's got that stamp on it. Also, we'll need the CD letter indicating final approval with a date no more than 2 years prior to the application receive date. A DSA letter indicating final plan approval, dated no more than 1 year prior. You can't have extension stamps. How can I say this? The application receive date or the date that the district entered into the construction contract. So that means if you get particularly with modernization projects, you may have DSA dates that are very old. As long as you have on your 5004 the date that the project started construction, then you're fine. All applications have to meet Ed Code Section 17070.955. That's your career technical education requirement, and that's your letter. Okay, so all applications must come with that letter. For financial hardship applications, we need the financial hardship approval letter with an expiration date no later than the received date, and we accept only final approval letters, and they are only valid for 6 months. Okay. All right, the following slide is going to be going over new construction project elements only. So for a minute, we're not going to be discussing things that are needed for the modernization projects. We need a detailed site development cost estimate. The plan verification team has developed a cost estimate worksheet that is quite useful, and it is available off of our website. No lump sums and schedules of values are permitted. We need that site development worksheet, which breaks out each element of the cost estimate. Include all related document for special district fees. For example, in the B section of your cost estimate, which relates to the off-site work, you'll have special district fees related to your water district. What did you pay to tap into the sewer, electrical, etc. We need documentation showing what you did pay for that. So that can come in the form of a letterhead from the utility district indicating their estimate, because maybe you don't have the actual cost, you only have an estimate. Or even canceled checks that showed that you did pay for those. Those are all really helpful in speeding up your application process. The site development worksheet for additional grants is available, as I mentioned, on the forms page of the OPSC website. We'll also need geotechnical or soils reports. The geotechnical report must come with the geotechnical engineer's stamp on it. We won't be able to accept it without that stamp. The geotechnical report can also be included as part of your specifications. So if you don't want to print out an entire geotechnical report and you only want to print out the elements that you know PVT is going to be looking at, then you can slide that into your specifications. Just don't forget the stamp. We're going to go over a little bit of the modernization only, so the following slides will only be referring to modernization application elements. 50 years or older building fund requests. We need a site diagram or a plan indicating the age of the buildings and approximate square footage of all buildings on site. If you're coming in for site development for your utilities, we need a site development worksheet that tells us, well, what work was involved in digging up the old utilities, tapping into the new utilities, putting in all the work involved. Basically, for this element, for this particular utility one, for the 50-year-old utilities, that element is treated like a new construction application with respect to the site development worksheet. So everything you send in, your plans, your specs, rarely a geotechnical report, all have to follow the same guidelines as if it was a new construction project. For excessive cost hardship funding for accessibility and fire code requests, DSA approved fire life and safety or accessibility checklist. This is now only for the 60% option. You don't need to send it if you're doing the 3% option, only the 60%. Has to be a detailed cost estimate in that sense. So itemization of quantities and costs, no lump sums. Break out each element as it applies to the construction of your fire life safety and your ADA requirements. Do I have any questions? No? This is a helpful resource page that we put together and gives you the email addresses of the art staff team as well as our phone numbers, and a number of links that are quite helpful in getting you to the documents that are required for a complete application. If there's no further questions, then I'm going to hand this over to the accounting team with Frida and Paula. Thank you.
Hi, we're going to go over the fund release authorizations. After receiving an apportionment from the State Allocation Board, the school districts are required to submit a fund release authorization form SAB 5005 within the time limit stated on the board item. Accounting receives the Form 5005 and reviews the form and the backup documents before processing the fund release. The types of apportionments that we do the fund releases for are new construction, modernization, preliminary, charter school, career technical education, joint use, overcrowded relief grant, and design and closeouts are automatically released. Tips for filling out the form SAB 5005 are the district should use the most current form 5005. Currently, we're using the December 2011. The districts should completely fill out the district information at the top. Any incorrect form 5005s will be returned to the district. We will call them prior to see if they can send in the corrections. Here's an example of a completed SAB 5005, the top portion. Part 3 on the 5005 is for separate site apportionment. It's used only for sites, for site apportionments. You need to check the appropriate boxes. And here's where Part 3 is found. Site acquisition, you would fill out Part 4 and you would check the appropriate boxes. That's for new construction. Part 7, joint use projects. You check the appropriate applicable boxes. Contracts must be at least 50% of the construction in the plans and specifications. Submitted contract documentation should include data contract, dollar amount, and type of contract. The dates must be filled out. Here's where you'll find the Part 7 on the 5005. And Paula's going to go over Part 5.
Okay. Part 5 is the most common section filled out for the 5005, and this is for the new construction, modernization, and charter school rehabilitation. The districts must check the applicable boxes, and the contracts must be at least 50% of the construction in the plans and specifications. Submitted contract documentation should include the date of contract, dollar amount, and type of contract, and the dates must be filled out. Here's where the Section 5 is located on the 5005. The documents required for a fund release are the signature page of the construction contract that meets the fund release requirements and the copy of the notices to proceed certified on the Form SAB 5005 and the labor compliance approval documents. And these documents are applicable for Parts 5 and 7. Just for a brief summary of the labor compliance program documents, evidence of a LCP is required for all projects with construction contracts awarded on or after January 1st of 2012. And the required documents that are currently acceptable are the PWC 100 or the DIR confirmation that the PWC 100 was submitted. Evidence of an LCP is required for projects funded from Prop 47 or 55 with contracts awarded prior to January 1st of 2012. These required documents are the LCP third-party contract, if applicable, and the DIR approval letters, initial and each extension. The district should also fill out Part 10 if it's applicable. This is to identify the district's construction delivery method. The districts must fill out the district representative's information on the bottom of the third page of the 5005. The signatures must be original. We prefer blue ink just so we can verify that it's original. And it must be signed by an authorized representative. And the sign date must be on or before the OPSC receive date. For our claim schedule process, the way that it works is accounting approves the SAB 5005 and the supporting documents, and then a claim schedule is prepared to release the funds. The claim schedule then goes to the State Controller's Office for processing of the warrant, and it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for SCO to issue the warrant. You can also check the status of your fund release on our website. After you follow these steps from our website, and you click on the link for the SFP transaction detail, it will show you the district's apportionment, and it'll also update the expenditure side once the fund release has been processed. Any questions? No? Okay, next it's going to be Bill Savage.
Good morning, everyone. And I know those people that are hiding over there, you know, the position of the podium makes it difficult. But I want to give you an update on the Implementation Committee of the State Allocation Board and the recent meeting that we had on August 10th, 2012. And we looked at the use of grants issue for hybrid minimum essential facilities for the third time. And staff presented options for square footages that would be appropriate for hybrid facilities that were developed using input from the California Department of Education, from the original lease purchase program, which had some different spaces that they took square footage from, and also from the Department of Defense using some facilities information that they had. So this gives an idea of the square feet per student that would be used for the calculation of the minimum and maximum square footages that might be allowable for a hybrid facility. So we're talking about a facility that could be a gymnasium and a multi-purpose room, for example, on a campus. And next, staff walked us through this complicated calculation, and I know everybody can make this calculation in the audience, in your heads right now, so you'll know exactly, based on the number of students you have, how big your facility will be and what the minimum and maximums would be. But this gives us guidance for the regulations going forward, because we need to be able to understand with the pupil grants and the use of grants what sizes as a minimum or a maximum would be funded by the state using this new formula. And finally, staff did also walk us through and remind everyone that these types of facilities for multipurpose rooms, gyms, and hybrids would be applicable only as shown on the screen. So for an elementary school only has a multipurpose room, no gym facility. For a middle school, you could do either an MPR and a gym, or a hybrid MPR gym facility, and same thing would be applicable for a high school. And then if you combine go across grade levels, so for example a K-8, then the combination elementary middle school site would use the middle school level, so you would be allowed for a K-8 to build a hybrid facility. And this is the final Implementation Committee review of this item. The committee members were very pleased with the closing direction, and it's going to be we anticipate that it'll be on the State Allocation Board's calendar for September to provide for updated regulations that go forward. There were some concerns at the meeting related to the facility hardship table, which had been used to show the minimum and maximums as part of the illustrative process, and why that wasn't being updated as part of the regulations. But I think staff really made it clear that that wasn't going to be updated, because it's really a table that's used more for facility hardship rather than developing the these types of use of grant requests. So this item will be going forward, and that's the last time you're going to have to listen to me talk about it. But now I'm going to go on to my next favorite topic. But before I do, I think it's really important. We have a great OPSC staff team that works with the Implementation Committee, led by Brian Odell, and including Hannah Konoff, Valerie Castro, and Jeremy McCarroll. They provide a really high level of support for the Implementation Committee, and their knowledge of the regulations, is rivaled only by that of Juan Morales. So they really understand the rules, and they understand how to work with groups to help them understand where these go. So, project information worksheet. The State Allocation Board has asked us to look at adding other programs to the project information worksheet. And we're focusing now in the first instance on adding modernization information. So if a district receives a modernization grant for a project, they would also submit a PIW. There's already one instance where a modernization project does submit a PIW. That's if they have a high performance incentive grant that's a part of their project. They would fill out the last page, the high performance incentive grant section only. But this is to look at adding modernization information and data so that we can begin to understand the work that's been completed in our schools and to provide for a greater level of bond accountability to the voters and to the citizens of the districts where the work is being done. So after we got through last time, we had the general outlines of where staff wanted to go, and this time staff brought forward a number of concrete proposals for how to implement this, including looking at two different approaches, one based on the type of work and the other based on buildings on a campus. Looked at specific questions to ask and spent a lot of time on that. Looked at the type of work that might be asked about and had several discussions regarding the level of detail and whether to quantify scope areas and dollar amounts for the work. So stay tuned for more on that. These are the two approaches. I'm sure everyone in the audience can read the small print of the boxes, but if you're on the web, you'll definitely be able to see these. So on the left side is the type of work-based approach. So this is an instance where, let's say, for example, at Kennedy High School in Richmond, an application that was just processed by OPSC, the district completed doors, hardware, thresholds, and path of travel upgrades on all 17 buildings on the campus. So in that case, the district might select a type of work-based approach to input because they have one type of work and then they could just click that all buildings or click each building had that one type of scope, for example, ADA compliance work. Differently, in a building-based approach, this might be most appropriate where you did a significant amount of modernization work on a building. So, for example, you had a single building and you gutted it and rebuilt it and did all of the work over 16 different divisions. That might be more appropriate to report that based upon the building rather than the type of work. So we're looking at two different ways because, reporting on modernization, to be really frank with you, is, as staff has figured out and we've all figured out, it's a lot more complicated than new construction because of the scope issues in terms of trying to define the scope and how it's completed. So I apologize again to the audience who might not be able to read the fine print on this, but this is a staff prepared a chart to say, okay, what are some of the basic questions that we want to know on a PIW related to modernization? School type, number of students, project type, and we are looking at like-kind replacement of buildings, like-kind replacement plus modernization, limited scope modernization, systems and infrastructure upgrades, full scope modernization, and then the whole gamut of other. Other is one of our great, it's one of the great words in the English language when you're filling out a form because you can just take care of everything under other. So, for example, other types of modernization that districts do, energy retrofits, playground work. There's just a million of them out there, photovoltaic installation. So we looked at that, and then the chart along the bottom contains some of the basic questions: the building name and number, type of facility, so is it an MPR, is it a gym, is it a classroom, number of classrooms if it's a classroom building, number of stories, construction type, total square footage of the building. Obviously, this is one of the key elements in terms of data analysis. The square footage of building area modernized is a key industry indicator for developing cost per square foot and having an understanding of the scope of work completed. The age of the building, years since last modernized, and one of the subjective questions: will this building require further modernization within the next 5 years? The committee spent a lot of time talking about sort of the validity of each of these questions, and we had a really good discussion with the stakeholders that were involved. Here's a like-kind replacement, very similar, but part of what we would want to try and gather with a like-kind building replacement is, okay, original area and then replacement area. And obviously under the state's program, modernization like-kind replacement funds only the same area, but many, many districts throughout the state are doing like-kind replacement and adding square footage. And so we want to make sure we capture that, because part of what we're trying to capture with the PIW is the information from school districts that we, the state, doesn't necessarily have as part of its database in reporting on our projects. And finally, we looked at modernization scope areas roughly laid out by construction division or construction categories or elements. And for example, item 4 there, ADA compliance, you know, that's not a real construction area, but it's a very common type of work that districts do for modernization, so it seems important to capture that as a single piece. So we looked at elements including building electrical systems, mechanical systems, floor finishes, exterior envelope, which would include roofing. So looking at ways that we would then ask districts to use a drop-down checklist in the PIW to indicate the scope of work that was completed on their project. Now, we had another level that staff has been working on with us, which is can we have input back from districts about quantifying the areas or the units of the work performed? So let's say, for example, the district checks HVAC. Well, how much HVAC? Did you do 10 units? Did you do 100 units? That kind of thing. So, and even further, what was the cost of the work? So there's a lot of discussion internally. There was a lot of discussion at the meeting about whether this was too much detail, and then the more fundamental question: how would the data be used? What would it be good for? And what level of detail do we get to that's an appropriate level? So we're going to continue the discussion at our next meeting on September 7th. It's moved up from the second Friday to the first Friday because the Allocation Board meeting has moved to September 19th from its normal date on the 26th. So Implementation Committee will meet in the Capitol on September 7th, 2012 to continue this discussion. So while I have you all here today, I want to take just a minute to give you an update on the State Allocation Board's Audit Subcommittee. And there's a working group of the subcommittee composed of representatives from the State Controller's Office, from FCMAT, from the California Department of Education, private auditors, county offices of education. And this group is staffed by two of the most amazing people in OPSC, Mr. Rick Asbell and Mr. Steve Inman, and they've done an incredible job supporting the committee, providing us with really excellent documents as we work through a pretty complicated review. What this working group is doing is at the request of the board, looking at previous recommendations that the board accepted and trying to look at where we might need to adjust them or change them in some way, and trying to look in more detail, how do we get to an updated audit process for the school facilities program. And so I'm going to show you a graphic in a second, but I'll describe what was presented at the meeting. And that's, first of all, to establish a single consolidated incremental compliance checklist for a project at 18 months from fund release. Right now, and you guys all know this more than I do, but right now, you submit your expenditure report, your 5006 at 12 months, you submit your substantial progress certification at 18 months, and you have certifications that are often checked on the back end of the project in audit or final review. And the board was concerned that as much as possible, certification review would happen at the front end of the project, and that all of the reviews would be consolidated and streamlined to make it easier both for OPSC and for the stakeholders. And so the proposal here is to create a single consolidated check area, which would include checking certifications from the 5005 or from the 5004. And one of the things that we looked at, the staff provided, was an excellent matrix of the certifications that are required of school districts on those two forms. And we had a good discussion about prioritizing them and which ones were the most important ones, et cetera. This will require some work related to the existing statutes and the existing regulations, very clear, but it is an interesting concept that I think meets the needs as expressed by both stakeholders and the State Allocation Board for getting certifications reviewed as soon as possible and for looking at ways to consolidate and streamline the process. The second piece that was part of an initial recommendation from the Audit Subcommittee to the board, which the board adopted, but which was not fleshed out, I think, at the time, and that staff has done a great job of working us through, is that this proposed process would provide for external audits of SFP projects and use the district's annual education audit. So every district goes through an audit that is conducted through the state and is done by a private auditing entity that comes into the school district. This happens every year. The audit guide is developed annually. And so the concept here is that if you submit a 5006 at the 18-month consolidated checkpoint, that would automatically trigger your district having some selected sample of expenditures audited as a part of your education audit. And each year OPSC would work with the Education Audit Appeals Panel and the Education Audit Group to develop the questions, the focus, the number of sample transactions, et cetera, that would be part of a district's annual audit. And then eventually, when the project is completed, whether 100% 5006 is submitted or the project passes the 3 or 4 year milestones, then the OPSC would conduct the final closeouts, and specifically focusing on taking any projects that require financial adjustments back to the State Allocation Board. And I know that the audience members probably can't read this slide, and I apologize again, but it is on the web, and it's also on the web in our audit working group website, but this gives you an idea of the flow chart for what I just described for a new audit process proposed that is going to be coming forward. And the next steps here are really to confirm what are the statutory and regulatory changes required. And we are also going to take this back to the Audit Subcommittee of the Board for next Monday morning, bright and early, 9 a.m., to present them with the proposed direction and get some feedback from them, because we don't want to get too far out ahead of the board. These are some pretty interesting ideas and really well fleshed out by staff, but we want to make sure that the board is up to speed on where this is going. So that's my report, and I want to turn it over to the California Department of Education, Mr. Fred Yeager.
Bill, before you leave, and you didn't ask for questions, and to show that I do pay attention at the IMP committee, on the minimum essential piece, what my understanding was that the minimum, and the wording is meaning that not the minimum size, but the features, multi-purpose room. But that is a funding minimum. What the state is willing to participate in is not a design criteria. So if that minimum in Bill's fancy math or maximum came in at $12,000 and you wanted to build $13,000, that's fine. It's what the use of grants can use to do that. That other 1,000 feet would be on the district's dime, presumably. Good. So, let's see, what else? Yeah, just going to talk about a couple things today, briefly. I think last month I wasn't here because I was at the press release for the UC Berkeley Center for Cities and Schools report on K-12 educational infrastructure. And it's 80-some pages that I'm going to cover in about 8 slides. And so you can read in greater detail a historical overview of capital, state capital assistance, analysis of a lot of data, review of research nationally, locally, statewide, and interviews with dozens of people within the state, not just districts, but state-level folks, architects, people outside of the school environment, even, in infrastructure, highways, and those types. So, what the report has 3 research questions, and you can see the first one is, how can the state better promote efficient and sound planning for K through 12 school facilities across the state? And the second one, see, that talks about the prioritization of funding. And what policy, regulatory changes, statutory perhaps, are needed to make those happen. Okay? So those are the 3 general research questions that Dr. Vincent attacked. Now, in that he identified some barriers in aligning the infrastructure of schools with other state policy areas like sustainability, the greenhouse gases, all the other efforts of that have been implemented in SB 375 and EB 32. So linking a large state investment, $35 billion over the past 10, 12 years, with other state priorities on how to reduce greenhouse gases, sustainable communities. And these are the 4 areas he found that there are some challenges: planning, management, funding, and accountability. So he can go into greater detail in his report on how he got to those 4 challenges. And you can see needs have changed. It is argued in the report that the SFP was largely focused on new construction. That's where the majority of the money went. And now things have changed with demographics, aging of schools, that maybe there's a need to be focused on modernization, perhaps. And that there is not that linkage in law that ties sustainability and school facilities. There are certainly a number of interactions between the locals and the districts, but Dr. Vincent found that the formal linkage in law is not robust. Management challenges include, not me, that there is a lack of statewide information on school facility needs, and this is something that has come out from LAO and others over the past decade as to how does the legislature grapple with what is the need, a statewide inventory perhaps, and the need for flexibility. And that's in the funding and the use of the funds and the processes. Funding challenges include funds for educational modernization have been inadequate. And this sort of jives with what Bill was talking about, the PIW, that a lot of the projects are, whether they're ADA, fixing the air conditioner, but are they making changes to upgrade science labs to accommodate STEM, linked learning, CTE. Funding has been inequitable. And the total need over the next decade is about what was spent both by state and locals over the past decade. And a large portion of that $117 billion, and Dr. Vincent details the 4 components in there, but a large portion, about almost half, maybe 40%, is the ongoing, what you want to call it, the cost of ownership. Fixing things, your preventative maintenance, so they don't become deferred maintenance. So he goes through an estimate on that. Okay. And accountability challenges, lack of program outcome accountability. Not so much on the fiscal side he's talking about, but what was built, how did it coordinate with local sustainability efforts, and there are no minimum condition standards established. So once the school is built, pursuant to Title V, the Field Act, there is not an ongoing structure within law to allow a monitoring of the conditions. And you know that's a lot of Williams overtones you can see in there. Are they being maintained? Are they being cleaned? So, then he has 8 recommendations. Establish a state vision and master plan. So what is the state's goal in investing in school facilities? Is it to build new schools? Is it to modernize new schools? Is it both? Is it to link with community efforts and sustainability? And to promote local intergovernmental planning. There are certain features within Education Code and Government Code that mandates some level of consultation. And Dr. Vincent believes that needs to be enhanced. Assemble needed information. Talked about the need for whether it's a statewide inventory. Review and update Title V. That falls in the CDE review of how can, in Dr. Vincent's argument, Title V address some sustainability issues as well as updating for current educational needs. Set funding priorities. And you can read about his thoughts on that. Establish state funding capital renewals, and that's sort of an expansion of modernization as we know it today. Something that may recognize that a 60-year-old school is not worth modernizing. You just take it down, and there's funding that recognizes that increased cost. Identify multiple revenue sources, and this could be maybe it's partially bonds, but there are some things such as the cost of ownership that are not suitable for bond funding. Those are coming out of what we used to call, like a deferred maintenance structure out of your general fund. So that multiple revenue sources. And improve public accountability. Okay. So that's all reported on our webpage here, where you can download both the report and Dr. Vincent did a webinar about 10 days ago that you can also view on our webpage. It's about an hour, and he'll go into some more detail on his research, methodology, and findings, so you can check that out. Alrighty, and second thing I want to talk about was the second year of the U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon. Is called the last fiscal year. There was 4 schools that were awarded the Green Ribbon by U.S. Department of Education. So this is round 2 and follows a roughly the same process last time of a submission, CD review. And that's, let's see, get to the timeline. So here's the timeline. September 10th, which is on a Monday, 2 weeks. The application will be available on our website, and you can see the timeline there. So that about 2 weeks to complete it, 2 months. 2 months. There will be a need for the district to interact with a number of folks in the district in curriculum and other departments. And again, this information is all available on our webpage. Green ribbon, and there's our contacts, and I think that's it for everything. Any questions, clarifications, corrections? All right.